The first question I had, just kind of something random from talking, I had the chance to talk to your wife, your longtime best friend Willie, your son Johnny over the past several days. And what's this I hear about you needing to get through everything really quick, that you have to do everything really fast?
Well, I think it's always been my nature. Everyone has a different personality, and I really have unfortunately, A-type personality in the sense that if I'm not moving, I'm not doing very well. And when it's like I read fast, I want to get somewhere fast. I never want to be not on time, and I've always been like that in my life. When I was a kid, I loved the outdoors, loved to go fishing. I couldn't wait to get there at the crack of dawn and get home after dark. And same with hunting, the same with running. I ran everywhere because we didn't have a car. And it's just always been part of my personality to play golf. If it takes 3.5 hours, I don't want to play. And I've always been that way. And it's something that, I think is part of my DNA. And obviously, as I get older, maybe it becomes even more pronounced.
You've called yourself the master of indirection. In what ways?
Oh my gosh. It's like, I guess probably, I am a creature of habit, okay? If there is a wreck on the freeway and it's going to take 2 hours to get there, and say it was game day, I don't care if I got there at the last minute. I was going that way.
Really?
I'm very superstitious, very.
And you won't travel with the team on away games, right?
No. First of all, I don't think you should. I think it's a huge distraction for a general manager to be around players and coaches all the time, and particularly coaches, because I think at times coaches would look like somebody's looking over my shoulder. When you hire someone, you hire them to do the best possible job that they can. And you're not there to critique them if they don't ask you something. Your job is to go to them and say, hey, look, what kind of players do you like? We'll try to get a player that will make a difference in your team. And this is something that I've believed all along. I'd rather not be caught up in asking a difficult question when, when there's something, a bad loss occurs, a bad loss because either, maybe in my mind, a coach might have made a poor decision in a part of a game in terms of personnel on the floor, or also when a player makes a crazy mistake that cost you a game, literally cost you a game. That's a time I don't think a general manager should ever make a comment, or someone who's affiliated with the team. Don't make them when it's so highly emotional to start with. Don't do that.
I know you like Malcolm Gladwell books, and how much do you believe in not second-guessing your first impulse and trusting your gut?
Well, to me, he is a writer that I really connect with. And one of his books, he talks really about people who make decisions very quickly. And to me, it's about processing information. I know what I like, and I pretty much know what I don't like. And I've often said, if I walk, let's say I walk in a store, this would be a typical example. If someone tries to sell me something, I leave. I know specifically what I want. And regardless if I'm buying a gift, if I'm trying to do something for someone personally, if it's for a member of my family, I've given a lot of thought already. So if I go in there, I get turned off by people coming over, oh, this is beautiful, that's beautiful. My first comment would, no, that's not what I'm looking for. And that's just me. I've always been that way, and I don't think I ever want to change, to be honest with you. I do form opinions very quickly, particularly when basketball players, which has been a huge part of my life. I know what kind of players I like. I know what kind of players that I would prefer to have on our team. And these are the things that have driven me in my basketball career. Even as a player, I knew the kind of players I liked to play with. And because you don't always get to play with those players because of the draft and personnel that's been there, if you come in as a rookie and say your career is moving along, I know the kind of players I like to play with. I like to play with players that are serious players, that go out there every night and compete every night. And I also like unselfish players. And those are the things to me that allows you to build a team, and particularly build a team that's built around some solid foundation. And in NBA in particular, and also college, you're just not going to win at a high level unless you have a balance with your team. You got to be a good defensive team, and you have to be a good offensive team. Plus, you want to play with a lot of great guys.
As a former NBA general manager, how tough was it for you to cut or trade or release one of your players?
Probably one of the most incredibly down times of your life when you have to do that. If you've traded a player that's been with you a long time, if you a coach is going to tell you who he wants. You're not going to influence that. And you're doing a coach might say, hey, go look and see the executive. But when you do those things, it takes a little piece out of you, it really does, because all of these kids who come into the league, their desire is to play professional basketball at its highest level. When you're in college and you go there, and hopefully kids go there to get an education, but more importantly to compete for your university and develop relationships. In the NBA, it's so cold in the sense that, people talk, well, this is a job. Most average people would like to have a job like this, but because of the enormous competition for a place on a roster of 13 to 15, that's not very many people that are chosen to play at such a very high level. And you just know when you talk to these kids, it's like they're devastated. And for me, that was the most uncomfortable thing of all. I would have preferred that a coach would be in there in a meeting with me instead of being there by yourself. And then the other thing you have to contend with is agents. How can you do this, and how can you release him? It's hard to tell someone that your coaching staff doesn't think he's good enough to play at this level. But the other thing that really bothers me, and I know when I left a game, I could have played effectively, but I didn't want to see myself just be another player. I did not. And I see players, and there's a few players in our league now are playing that, frankly, I think they should have retired. And the money is so enormous that they're not going to do that.
When you were the general manager and have to release, cut, or trade a player, how would you, in some situations, reconcile your affection for the player with the need to effectively do your job?
Well, one of the things that I always tried to do, the younger players, I wasn't really concerned about the veteran players because they'd been around, they'd been through the wars before, but younger players who don't get to play very much, say, and maybe their first round draft pick, they're not playing anyone at all. And on good teams, it's very unlikely that they're going to play except late in the game and when the game is out of reach for other teams to win. I always go to those players and I said, look, how are you going to impress your coach? I said, you're going to impress him by going to practice every day, and whoever you're playing against, you have to show that player, and more importantly, you have to prove to the coach that you can compete against him successfully. I said, that's your biggest way to make an impression on the coach. It's also unfortunate that someday you might take his job and he might be a great friend of yours. But that's what this is all about. The strongest survive. And I think all sports are about that. If you can't compete at a high level, and the one thing that is a killer in sports, when you're at your very best mentally, when you know every nuance of the game, there's one thing that you don't defeat, and that's time. And you can see the deterioration of athletes who want to play at the same level. I think as you go along later in your career, you have to adjust your game.
What was that like for you?
Well, for me, a new coach suggested to me, he said, instead of scoring 25 or averaging 25 or 30 a game, he said, I want you to lead the league in assists. I led the league in assists. But I think it takes the right coach and the right temperament of player to be able to subtly read the message that maybe you can't do those things as well as you used to do. But having said that, I didn't think I was a very good player then because I just felt I didn't have the physical edge that I felt I had before. And but I had, in the eyes of most people in the league, a great year. I led the league in scoring, averaged almost 26 points a game. And I didn't think I was very good. But
Wow.
I was a huge critic of myself. I mean, after every game, it's probably why I don't sleep very well, never slept very well. I'm very critical of everything that I do as an executive, making suggestions to ownership, as an executive, making decisions where you trade players because you think you can do better with another player. But at the end of the day, I think how I judge myself, I was much too critical for myself, much too critical. But I'm a traditionalist. I believe you do everything at the highest level that you can. You push yourself. You don't retreat. You go forward. And the one thing that won't let you do that in sports is age.
You apparently, when you were playing, got so caught up in winning that you wouldn't even actually enjoy it when you did win. Explain why.
Well, as I say, we're all wired differently. I believe in perfection. You can't have perfection almost in any sport. You know, you can go out and I think one night in one game, and I don't remember very much about my career. I think I missed one field goal and no foul shots. I had 14 rebounds and 12 assists, like 40 points. And after the game, I said to myself, I can't believe I missed this driving layup. And yet you walk out and say, my God, this was almost as good as it can get, but still in my own mind, I didn't think that it was necessarily a great game because I had numbers. We won, and that was the most important thing. But again, I analyzed everything that I did, horribly critical of myself, horribly.
What compelled you to keep playing if you weren't getting the, appreciation, the satisfaction out of doing the work?
Well, I think that the one thing is competition. If you don't want to compete, you're not going to probably do very well in this world, and particularly if you're an athlete. Mm-hmm. I was a driven competitor. When I played, I never said a word. I was talking to the officials after a game. I ran into them last night, and they were, not just conversations about, their jobs and what I'm doing at this stage in my life. And one of the things is that I think you have to realize that you're with the best of the best. And these young officials come into the league, they're under a lot of scrutiny, and they're becoming under more scrutiny today. And you have to be very thick-skinned to be able to, some of the verbal jabs that, not from opposing players, that we talk about trash talkers. I'd love to play against trash talkers.
You did?
I loved it.
Why?
Because I wanted to embarrass them.
Okay.
I really wanted to embarrass them, and I never played anything to embarrass anyone. I wouldn't want to embarrass anyone, but I hate people that are not very good, that talk. The good ones can talk all they want to, but the ones who are not very good and think that you're going to intimidate someone, and you're not going to intimidate me in anything. I don't care what it is, you're not going to do it. It was just a special time in my life where I felt this competitive zeal that I had was at the highest level, and it enabled me to really go from being a player to someone who had confidence in me, that felt I could do a job as an executive. I had the same competitive feel as an executive that I did when I was a player.
When you finally won a championship, did it live up to your expectations?
Not really.
Why not?
I don't think it really sunk in until about 2-3 days later. There was times when as you prepared for a season, it was a lot different then because you had to work in the off season to support yourself and your family. I would start jogging, and I'll never forget, some gentleman was a real good friend of mine. We were running together, and in California it's nice to run in. The weather is really good and nice cool breeze. And this guy said, "Oh, I guess you guys are going to choke again." Oh my gosh. I've never been a violent person in my life. I really wanted to be violent. I was so crazed by a stupid comment, and I'm sure we'd have a lot more today with all the social media and everything.
How long ago was that?
Oh God, 70, something like that.
It's amazing that you still remember.
Well,
that one
very
comment.
distinct things, very distinct things. But again, as I said before, they're the same that have always driven me. I am a driven person, still am today.
When I was speaking to your son Johnny the other day on the phone, I mean, he just reiterated that you know, that you are a perfectionist, that nothing is really ever good enough. You're never fully satisfied. How true is that?
Very true. And I think that's a part of the competitive nature of people. I'm always winning championships in Los Angeles, and we won a number there, and I left a team that won 2 more after I left. It really was no changes in the team. I think the thing that I learned was just when the season was over, how can we get better? I really, really believe that that's what kept me going, the desire to have a perfect team or something that could be near perfect, knowing full well that wasn't going to happen.
You wrote in your book, quote, "My worst trait by far is that I expect everyone to care as much as I do about everything, and it is both terrible and unfair." Explain why you think that.
Well, it is unfair because, again, as I say, when you're your own biggest critic, you're never going to be satisfied with yourself. I think growing up in a real small community, one of the things that you see, everyone has the same, okay? No one is, some have less, and the ones that have more don't have very much. And I think it probably comes from, you know, watching people struggle to feed their families, to try to do the best they can for their children. And I know that with me, the things that always drove me, I wanted to catch the biggest fish. I wanted to be the fastest guy in school, which I was. I wanted to be able to jump higher than anyone in school, and I was. It was just part of my DNA. I don't believe, I think if you hold yourself at a lesser esteem, then it's not going to work in getting to the top of the mountain.
How much self-confidence do you have?
If I make decisions, I make them and don't even question them. And I've made a lot of tough decisions in my life, a lot of criticism. And for the people who are critical, I would ask them to go back and look at the decisions we made. Did they turn out right? And for the most part, they did.
What embarrasses you about receiving attention?
I don't like attention. That's not who I am. I'm very normal. I like the same things that the average person does. I love people. I love interacting with people. But having said that, the only difference between me now and years ago is having to involve yourself with the press, have to be responsible for the questions and particularly the answers you give to questions. Otherwise, I probably would like to completely disappear.
Really?
Yeah, oh yes.
What?
Absolutely. Well, I'm nothing special, okay? I'm not. I did something in my life that I love to do. I didn't play this game to win awards. I didn't play this game to...
But you are special, and you're really accomplished.
Well,
and it's because
in your mind.
It's because of your hard work, and it's earned.
Well, in your mind, I don't think I am personally. It's just me. I don't. I like to be around people where I'm not Mr. West. I'm too old already, but I'm Jerry, and I'm still the same kid that came from a small town in West Virginia and have the same feeling about people. I will do anything for people if I can, anything. That's what drives me today, to try to help people, particularly young people that are looking for advice, and also, more importantly, trying to, seems like everyone wants to get involved in professional sports today. And I tell them how hard it is. And we have a lot of schools that offer degrees in sports management. That's not enough. There's a business side of it today that has changed enormously with the huge salaries that are being paid, managing directives from the league office about how to run a franchise, being responsible to the press, not thinking you're above the press because you're not. And I always had a saying that or not a saying, but something I said to myself, the more someone was critical to me, if he called, I always return calls. If somebody calls me about something, I return their phone call. And with the more vehement people who thought we weren't doing a very good job or wanted to be a controversial writer, I would always take their calls, and probably a couple of them today would tell you that, you know, I'm not nearly as bad as they made me out to be.
One other quote from your book before I ask you about writing it. You wrote about yourself that you're a tormented, defiant figure who carries an angry chip on his shoulder and has a hole in his heart that nothing can ultimately fill.
Probably all true. Probably all true.
Why do you think that?
Well, I think I've been defiant in my life, and I still am, because I think that's how I had to survive growing up. Came from a very tough background, and I think when you grow up in an environment like that, the person that you have to look to is you. You can't depend upon anyone else to make you feel better. You have to find something inside of you that allows you to get through these tough times. Defiant is because what I believe in, and particularly what I believe in about how you treat people, how you interact with people, how you interact with the press. If they ask you a very tough question, and sometimes some of them are pretty critical, that's okay. I don't care what you write, because I am defiant. And now, because I'm not in the newspapers very much, which I like, I try to counsel, you know, our people here, even the owner. He's had a couple of rough moments here where fans have not been pleased with him. And now if you look at where the Warriors are, in terms of popularity in this community, the growth of it, not only here in the Bay Area, but particularly nationwide, decisions that you make, you're going to be criticized for. And I said, you have to have a very thick skin. At one time, when somebody would write something about me that was negative, it really bothered me. It really bothered me. And I said, this is stupid, because of all the nice things that people have written about me, there has to be some balance in your life. And I've always felt that people that wrote the negative things, those are the ones that somehow, some way, if as a player, as an executive, we're going to prove them wrong. And I think it takes hard work. I think it takes someone who is stubborn and is not going to capitulate to all the criticism if you feel that you know what you're doing.
So you end up, you know, winning gold in the Olympics, and obviously you joined the Lakers, and much different time for the Los Angeles Lakers then than now, because you actually at one point are literally driving through the streets with the other Lakers players trying to recruit people to come to games.
Well, it was, you know, it's not, you know, now you go to games, and, you know, we were almost like pioneers, to be honest with you. The first team on the West Coast. In Los Angeles, we had the Dodgers and the Rams, Dodgers were moved into the Coliseum, which is, you know, about a 250-foot home run. They had a big screen out there. And the Rams were drawing 100,000 people a game. And we went to a game there, and they wanted to introduce us during the game. And we got up, and there was like a smattering of applause. And then our front office got this bright idea of putting us in the back of trucks, okay? It was like a hay wagon going through these neighborhoods, and come out and see us play, okay? Come out and see us play. And I can you imagine LeBron James or Tim Duncan. Maybe Tim Duncan would have done it. Or Kobe Bryant or some of our big stars. Can you imagine what they would have felt like?
I mean, you guys were getting what, like a few thousand fans out to a game initially?
No. We started out. Our first 2 games were against New York, and obviously there's a lot of transplanted New Yorkers there. First night there, I think we had like 4,800 people.
Okay.
And it was Friday and a Saturday night. And the next night we had 4,200 people. And I said to myself, we were a very popular team in West Virginia. Wherever we went, it was a sellout. And I said, I don't understand this at all. I said, but you really don't pay attention to fans. You pay attention to competition. But I said to myself, we got a long way to go. In the old sports arena, they had right up there in the end zone, had a counter up there. So every time someone came through the turnstile, you could start with 1 if you wanted to. And it was pretty easy to go up there and count to 4,800. You said, maybe we're going to have a little more we thought. And now you go to L.A. and they've had a lot of good times there, a lot of good times when I was there. And you see the place jam-packed and different kind of crowd than we had then. But all of those people, the first 2 nights, were rooting for the Knicks.
Explain why you dislike the color green and try to avoid at all costs going to Boston.
I haven't been to Boston since I stopped playing basketball, and the fans were great to me back there. They really were.
But I'm sure you've had opportunity in business and reason to go to Boston.
No. Well, I've had opportunities to go back a number of times, but it's just something I didn't want to do. A lot of old bad memories, and I don't hate green. Okay, I make a joke out of it, and I had great respect for the Celtics. We lost some really tough playoffs against them, and I thought there was 2 times we should have won, and we didn't win. And those are the things that you will take to your grave. I'm still tormented by those losses, to be honest with you. We in this league, we talk about greatness of players, how many championships they win. Well, trust me, there's a lot of these great players, if they didn't play with the right people, they wouldn't win championships. And you need good fortune, you need great teammates, you need good health, you need a great bounce here or there. And that never seemed to happen for us. And I think the one time that was really devastating for me is that we got beaten in the 7th final game on our home court, and Boston finished 4th in the East, and they win the NBA championship. They were not a better team than we were. They weren't. And I've had 2 dubious honors that I wouldn't recommend anyone to have. I was the most valuable player in the NBA finals on a losing team where we got beat by 1 point by California. And I was the most valuable player in a 7-game loss in a series against the Celtics. I don't know of any other player that's ever had that honor, and it's not an honor.
What do you remember from that?
Oh, just how stupid it was that I would receive that and I wasn't part of the winning team. It was didn't seem right. It was meaningless for me regardless of how I played.
You mentioned you're still tormented by some of the losses. Your Lakers lost 6 times to the Boston Celtics in the 1960s in the finals. What was that like?
Well, for me, as I say, I'm very reflective. I honestly wanted to quit. I didn't want to, and I was in the prime of my career, and I didn't want to play anymore. It was just too painful to go through summers, and obviously the fans would start to rally around us, and I really felt we had let the city down, our fans down, but more importantly in the locker room, it was like the lowest ebb that you could possibly have in your life.
But letting the city and fans down, I mean, you were in the NBA Finals 6 times.
Well, it doesn't make any difference.
In a decade.
Regardless of how I played, and for me, I did some incredible things in the playoffs, and it never seemed to be good enough. And you just said it. I used to say that a couple of those games in particular, I replayed them, and regardless of how I played, I always blamed myself for us losing. And that's a terrible burden to carry around with you. It's a terrible burden. And some people say, well, you got to let it go, let it go. Well, that's not me. I don't. But I think it did goad me into, after thinking about it, going from where I didn't want to play, and I was, again, at the height of my career, to maybe goading me into, we can do better, we can do better. And at the end of the day, I just know that that's what drove me back to playing again when I really did not want to play.
What was the hardest part for you in going through all of that?
You know, I always said to myself, you know, the thing that I love the most has brought me the most pain. And that was the thing personally that if everyone looks, you're someone who does a great job interviewing people. But if it doesn't bring you any joy, you have to find a way to take your talent and make it so you have some joy out of it. And I could never find that. I could really never find that. And you know, you try to have distractions in the off season where you can be lighthearted. And I've never been a person who, I'm not a partier, not much of a drinker at all, not much of a socializer. And I was just so immersed in a sport that I loved and that was my life, that I never really got to a point where I had appreciation for the opportunity to play in the league and to represent a team, one team and only one team. I think that was the greatest sense of accomplishment I felt. And it was just, we sit here and talking about it, I can almost relive those times, to be honest with you, because I've always shielded them very carefully and not elaborate so much on how I really felt.
Magic Johnson, what about him makes him one of the greatest leaders you've ever been around?
Well, you know, he played the game with a flair, okay? But if you also looked who he played with, he had, you know, talk about centers, Abdul-Jabbar was incredible. He does not get enough credit for being one of the all-time great players. They needed a player, or we needed a player like him, who could do so many things. He could rebound the ball, of course, extraordinary passer, and a great leader. And, you know, to watch him, have the privilege to watch him as a 20-year-old kid, 19-year-old kid, and go from Michigan State to come and make the impact that he made on this Laker team. And he was like a wild card because he could do so many things. And that's today why I think coaches, and particularly executives, admire players that have, they can play different positions. So if someone gets hurt, you're not hurt nearly as bad, and particularly when you're as great as he was. It just, maybe you put him in a position where we're gonna be better than the player that was out. And his enthusiasm, you know, smile, approachable. He hasn't changed a whole lot today. He can be very critical today, and particularly the Lakers, which he shouldn't do. But you know, I loved him, and today he and I are still good friends, and I'm thrilled for his success.
I was talking to your wife, Karen, about this the other day. One of the more trying times with him was obviously November of 1991 when everybody finds out he's HIV positive, and your wife recalls you coming home, going in the bathroom, and just starting to cry. How did you find out, and how did that affect you?
You know, I knew, and I think when you are shocked, you're first shocked, okay? And then for someone at that age of his career, the things that were said about him, him being so positive, getting up in front of an audience and relaying this message to not only people in the athletic world, but throughout the world, because professional basketball had become so popular. And to watch how he handled that was just an incredible thing. It's almost would be like a Monet or Rembrandt telling him, you can't paint anymore. You can't do this anymore because there's no way that you can move your hands. Well, here's somebody in the prime of his career who was gone. And honestly, I really felt like I didn't want to be involved anymore.
Why not?
Well, it was just because I felt so horrible for him. And at that point in time, it was like a death sentence. No one knew what in the world was going on. There's a lot of research. And he had the finest doctors, and when I see him today, I think to myself, my God, I remember back to that day. Of course, he had hair then. And I remember back to that day and walking out of that place and just feeling so despondent that really didn't know how to react to it. And then you sit there with it and you go in the office, you don't feel the same enthusiasm. And the same enthusiasm wasn't based upon us not having as great a team. But the enthusiasm that wasn't there was because how I felt for him. But once you get through that, as I say, I've always been competitive. And I knew if we worked hard enough, if we did the right things, that we were going to be very competitive again. Everyone had written us off, everyone. But I think working with our owner, Jerry Buss, I said, we can do this and we will do it again. But having lived through that, it's not something that I'll ever forget.
What about winning gold at the Olympics makes it the single biggest thrill of your career?
Well, that was really a unique time for me because, when you're in college, when you get in the NCAA tournament, you lose one game, you're gone. And we got close, we got beat in the finals, and little did I know that was going to be something that followed me around my whole career, and particularly in professional basketball, losing in the finals. But this was an amateur team. It wasn't a professional team. And just to make the team, because the process then was so difficult, it's not like it is today, just so difficult to make the team. And as college seniors, there'd never been a senior, or not a senior, but there'd never been a college all-star game who had won the tournament in that era. And I don't even think they'd ever won a game. All these AAU teams were comprised of people who were college All-Americans because there was a lot more money working for these AAU teams at that time than there was in the NBA. And to go to Denver, Colorado, and beat all of those teams, and when if the winning team had to have 7 people selected, and the rest of them came from these amateur teams who really weren't amateur, they were semi-professional. Mm-hmm. But I remember, the thing that I would distinctly remember about that was the first night I played, we won. I played horrible. I mean, I just played horrible. I went into my room and I said, oh my God. I said, we're going to have to win this, and I don't even know if I'm going to make the team. And the next night I played a lot better and we won handily again. And I think the last night we played, I had an incredible game in terms of playing against those caliber people, which we had not played against in college. And we won that game handily. And I'll never forget the late Pete Newell, who I loved as a person. He was like a father figure to me. He knew how sensitive I was about caring, and he stopped me on the street one day. I was walking around over the street after I'd played poorly. He said, don't worry. He says, you're going to get this thing going. And we won that, and I'd scored 38 points and had a bunch of rebounds. And I get a call in my room after the game. It was him. He said, I just want to congratulate you. He says, you're one of the 7 who made it. Even talking about that it's a real proud feeling. Because then...
What was that like, getting that call?
Oh my gosh, it was like, my God, I get a chance to represent my country. And I think that was, at that point in time, there were so many things going on in the world that were political, the Cold War, threat of nuclear war, our relationships with Russia, the things that had happened, the Korean War was over. And I had a brother killed in Korea. And I'd often felt that I wish he could have seen me play and represent our country. But it was, at that point in time, only 2 players got up and received a gold medal for your team. As great Oscar Robertson, a great friend of mine even today. We got up there and received that gold medal. And I know that the country was different. I know people were different. And the nationalism was incredible in this country then. It's not that way anymore. And for an amateur team to go over there and win the gold medal, and I think we got won by an average of like 41.5 points a game. And we didn't play our players very long. Obviously, the Europeans have gotten better, but it was, I can't tell you how thrilling that was for me. It was the single greatest moment of my basketball career, the single greatest.
What was so moving to you at those Olympic Games about standing there and listening to the national anthem being sung?
Well, I've often said to people that, if you're an athlete, there's something really special about winning, because we glamorize winning in this country. We don't ever look in the locker room of a losing team. We only see the elation of winning. But it was like, I've said to many of my friends, they asked me a lot of questions about that time. And I said to all of them, I said, I wish you understood what my body felt like at that time. I said, today I would like to have that same rush again. I felt I'd done something really significant that was part of a group that was all amateurs that went over there and we beat the dreaded communist Russia country, and to receive a gold medal and represent our country was truly something I'll never forget. But I'll never forget what my body felt like. I'll never forget that.
Only time you've ever felt that?
Oh my gosh, yes, yes.
Your son and your wife, when I asked each of them what their favorite memories were from your career, both immediately said the offseason in which you acquired Kobe Bryant and Shaquille O'Neal. How does that rank for you?
Well, it would be like, I guess, a poverty-stricken family wakes up one morning and all of a sudden overnight they become the wealthiest couple in the world. It was like one of the most elated periods in my life when we signed Shaquille O'Neal, because I worked so hard in doing that, establishing a relationship with him over the phone.
Okay.
And we had we had just developed a great rapport.
And what was involved with that?
Well, it wasn't always about basketball. It wasn't always about basketball. And, I like to kid, I like to have fun with people. I don't take myself seriously. I never have. I couldn't do that. And even today, when I see him, it's like, oh my God, here's one of my really big kids, okay? But I also told our owner that night, I said, look, I think we got the best player in the draft. And an 18-year-old kid, actually 17. And we could not sign him to a contract for about 3 months because he's only 17 years old. And people always ask about that. Well, it wasn't in vogue to draft these young kids. It was not in vogue. And it took a lot to get him, a lot of hard work. And I remember after that was done and the draft was done, I had to go in the hospital for 3 days. I was just emotionally spent and exhausted.
Because of how hard you were working to get
just,
Kobe and Shaquille?
Again, I don't sleep, okay? And you go to bed at night. I had notes beside my bed. I had every time you talk to someone, or at least I kept copious notes about the conversation. Talking with agents, even today, you should keep notes. And I was just exhausted. And it was one day to me, I went to see the doctor, and he said, the day after that, he said, we're going to have to put you in a hospital. And I was there for 3 days, and I was absolutely listless. I have no energy at all, and again, I've always been a high energy person. But that was the start of another great run for the Lakers, and two of the greatest players that we've had. Free agency is bad. Free agency is bad when teams lose their best players. But also you feel joy when maybe you liked a player that other people didn't like as much, who was 17 years old.
And that being Kobe Bryant, and when he was coming out of high school and going to enter the NBA, what about one of his practices that you watched made you get extra excited for him?
Well, it's really, I don't think it's hard to identify great players or great prospects. It's difficult to identify players who come along and make a real difference in your team. And we have one here in Golden State, Draymond Green. He wasn't drafted, I think, to 33 or 35 or something like that. He's a tremendous player. Why did people pass him up? Who knows? But he had something inside of him. And he didn't have the kind of talent that Kobe Bryant had. He didn't have the kind of talent that LeBron James had. He had just steadily improved because he's an incredible basketball mind. I'm talking about Draymond.
Right.
And now those guys were just so advanced physically. Oh my gosh, Kobe Bryant's skill level was off the chart. And when you watched him, the thing that you said to yourself, well, he's awful loose. And our players gave him a nickname, and I told him one day, I said, I don't like this. And they call him Showboat. And he'd dribble the ball between his back. You could put 5 people on him, and he would dribble between them all and go in and lay it up. Well, that's not the way you play basketball to win. And it was a big transition for him to get to a point where, he became the player that he was, and he had to change. And where we got Shaquille O'Neal, who was a finished product, hadn't even touched the height of his career.
How close did you and Kobe become?
First 2 or 3 years were very close. As I say, I've always paid attention to younger players, and I think he in particular, my kids, drove him around Los Angeles, and he didn't have a car, and he's 17 years old, so it's pretty funny to think a kid that we thought was the #1 pick. I thought he was the #1 pick in the draft, and our staff thought he was the #1 pick in the draft. And to watch my kids drive him around, I thought this was pretty funny.
Why do you think it was so difficult for Kobe and Shaquille to coexist?
Good question. I've often thought that if you watch teams, let's say somebody has a great player and he's a little bit older, and you've got this young, up-and-coming star, and all of a sudden that young, up-and-coming star, you start to look at him as being the equal of the other player in terms of ability, not in size, but ability. And I think that Kobe Bryant played every game like he didn't like anyone he played against, which I loved. He didn't like fraternization, which I loved. And Shaquille was like a big teddy bear who smiled, but you put him in a game where something was on the line, and you wouldn't want to play against Shaquille O'Neal. He was just so physical and so strong, and he had great footwork for a guy his size. And Kobe Bryant, at his position, was like a Shaquille O'Neal, and he kind of played the game with force too for a young kid. And I think the combination of Kobe wanting to exert himself more than he had, and Shaquille being very vocal about who he was, and in sometimes kidding ways, and always some kind of a new nickname for himself. I think those two different personalities had to clash somewhere along the way. I didn't think they'd ever clash to the extent they did.
Tell about the letter you wrote to both of them.
Well, not only letters, but I just, I tried to explain to them that they were so good for each other, and they're going to have different kind of people rooting for them. People are going to, awesome power. People like that, and that was Shaquille O'Neal. A big smile, how he interacted with people. People loved him, and I will tell you, he's a great guy. He's a great guy. And Kobe Bryant, a much more serious-looking approach to the game, and he's not going to smile. At that point in time, he didn't smile. He wanted to become the best player in the world, and he eventually got to that level. And those kind of personalities are going to change. And I basically said to him that this is really ridiculous. I said, this is about winning, and winning championships, which when you look back in your career, a lot of people are going to judge you because of that. and talked to them numerous different times.
While you were there, they were both there.
They were
Shaquille
fine.
didn't leave till after you left. But how much do you think the conversations or the letter resonated?
You know, I'm not someone to tell something they want to hear. I'm really honest with people. I'm honest to the point that it's maybe not be good. But somebody asked me a question, why should I beat around the bush? And particularly with athletes, why should you even bother to try to deceive them with talking kind to them about something that was wrong? And I'd like to think that I had every player. I don't care who was the first player on the team, the last player on the team. I wanted them all to succeed. But when you have these kind of extraordinary talents that's starting to butt heads, it doesn't make for a good feeling, not only for the players, but for the coaches. And somewhere along the way, there has to be a voice of reason. And to try to point out the pitfalls of them not being on the same page, not as players, but as people, was not good.
You wrote about Kobe in your book. You said about him that Kobe, quote, wasn't content just to beat people. He had to embarrass them, even players on his own team. What made you realize that?
All he had to do was go to practice. He talked a lot of trash, particularly in practice. But his greatness as a player, you weren't going to really guard him. I have to laugh. I hear these commentators on the air, so-called experts, a lockdown defender. There's no lockdown defenders that can guard great offensive players. There's none. They can make it more difficult, but these people are so skilled offensively that they have an advantage. And then I hear knockdown shooters. If a guy makes 2 or 3 in a row, he's a knockdown shooter. I don't know what a knockdown shooter is. I look at percentages, and I know guys can shoot.
So what would he do in practice?
Well, he competed in practice like he did in games. And in practice, I'll be honest with you, I could care less about practice from the extent it was necessary. I didn't like to try to kill myself in practice because I played so many minutes in games. And I mean, many times, you'd be sore and tired because we played 3 nights in a row sometimes. Those guys never played 3 nights in a row. I would tell Pat Riley, who was a very aggressive player, I said, Pat, go guard Goodrich, okay? I said, I'm sore tonight. And I said, we've got a hard game tomorrow night, okay? But Kobe wasn't like that. He was just relentless in his pursuit of, as he say, embarrassing players, was his own players or not.
Why do you think Shaquille O'Neal believes that he would have stayed with the Lakers had you not left?
I had a great relationship with our owner. And obviously that changed over the years when I left. I don't know if he's happy I left. I think he was happy when I said I can't be here anymore.
Your owner?
Jerry Buss. And our relationship has changed because he wasn't in the office as much. He basically retired and worked out of his house. And when we moved downtown, and that was coming, and I could see the change that it was undergoing for him because we'd won so much. And I just knew that me being there wasn't the right thing to do. Some people would always question decisions you make. I do what's best for me in terms of if I don't feel really wanted, if I don't feel really engaged like I was before, then I'm going to leave. I have an instinct about people, and if I'm not wanted, I know. And my instincts, I follow my instincts crazy. Malcolm Gladwell, and some of the books he's written are extraordinary. And he seemed, blink. People make quick decisions. That's me. And I make decisions that process information quickly, and I really trust my instincts. And probably for me, when I left the Lakers, it was the very best thing I did for not only myself, but for my health.
And you said it was ruining every aspect of your life at that point.
Yes, I couldn't stand what was going on there. I just couldn't take it anymore.
You open up in your autobiography about depression, the death of your brother, physical abuse from your father. And I've been told by a couple people close to you that they thought it was really therapeutic for you, in a way, actually writing the book. To what extent do you agree with that?
Well, I think there's so many things hidden by people today that probably maybe they talked about a little bit more, and particularly if you have a platform, as I do sometimes. I think it is therapeutic. I can't tell you how many letters I receive from people thanking me for writing this book and talking about the same things they experienced growing up and talking about how they got through it and how I got through it. I got through it because when my brother got killed, who was the closest to me and my family, he always encouraged me when I was little and tiny. I mean, it was tiny, skinny kid. When he got killed, it was like a shock because no one is good. He was deeply religious, should ever get killed. And
21 years old,
yeah,
Korean War.
Right. When I was 13, and I look back on that day, and I changed forever. I changed from being a really aggressive kid, and I was a tough kid. I changed forever. I changed to be deathly quiet, hardly communicated with anyone, and so my best friend was me. And at that age, if I'd had a friend to be able to, that maybe had similar experiences in your life, I might have had the ability to maybe lessen this burden on myself that really became a burden. And I just felt useless. I didn't feel wanted. I almost felt like a person who was surviving. And I think when he died, there was probably a higher calling for me and said, I'm going to do something that's going to make him proud. I just felt that maybe if I could do something that no one would ever think that I could do. And I mentioned in this book that at that point in time, these little tiny homes, you'd walk through people's yards to go place and everything. The only thing you had to worry about was a dog biting you. And I used to walk through this backyard to this place where I used to go shoot basketball myself. And I walked by this family's house, and I heard them, well, there goes Jerry. He's never going to amount to anything. All he does is play basketball. It was the most horrible. I probably felt that I wasn't bothering anyone. And my next door neighbor, they said this. And I wonder what happened to them, because they had moved. I wonder what happened to them when I went to West Virginia University, and all of a sudden, I became a prominent player, not only in the state, but nationwide. I would like to have said to them, something vile, but also, more importantly, I would love to have said to them, thanks for help motivating me to do something that I was determined to do anyway.
Whether then or later on in life, how would it affect you?
Well, it manifests itself with me through actually to watch how people treated people, how people interacted with people, and particularly to watch basketball players who couldn't understand the concept of teamwork. I always felt that teamwork was the essence of building something really special. I had great respect for everyone I played with, great. But if you're one of those people that's seeking attention, I probably wasn't as fond as you as a person as I was your basketball playing ability.
Your wife recalls the first time she met you, and you put this in your book as well. I guess you were, age difference, but you were very open to her, almost immediately. And she thought you were like the most unhappy person that she'd ever met. Why do you think she felt that way?
Because I was miserable. I was miserable. And it just, I think one of the most difficult transitions an athlete has to do and make is when they go from being on a tight schedule, regardless of what sport you are, football, basketball, baseball, hockey, when you go from being regimentated to the same kind of habits. I ate the same thing every day. Started to eat a lot earlier, later in my career, before a game. When you become that regimentated, and all of a sudden you say, I can't do this anymore, that regimentation's gone. And it feels like the greatest sense of relief to get rid of that horrible burden that you feel. And I know that during that time, I was missing that element of my life. A place to be, a reason to be there, and a reason to feel your body, the electricity in your body, the adrenaline that was running through your body. It wasn't there anymore. And if it hadn't been for an opportunity to go back and coach the Lakers, I really don't know what my life would have been. I really don't. And for me,
what do you think it would have been?
I have no clue. I have no clue. But I was fortunate enough to get back, re-engage with the Lakers, and spend 40 years of my life with that organization. Doesn't happen to very many basketball players.
What was that process like for you after that first year out of playing, just figuring out how to fill that void?
Well, probably the worst thing in the morning and waking up and saying to myself, what am I going to do today? I don't have practice, I don't have a game, I don't have to travel. And so that felt pretty good for a while. But yeah, actually about the playoff time, I really got itchy because that was an important time for any NBA player. It's like almost going from spring to summer. Spring, things are sort of sprouting, and summer, everything is in blossom. Well, the NBA playoffs are prominent, and that's what I loved. That's what you live for. And that's when I knew that I had to do something with my life that would at least put me on a course so that I could compete in something that I knew about. And little did I know it would be involved with the Lakers again as a coach, something I never really wanted to do. And from there to being an executive, where I seemed to really love that. I loved the hard work that you had to do it, and going out and watching players. I watched tons of players playing in college. I was all over the place because the lifeblood of our league is the new talent that we bring into this league as executives.
You wrote in your book, and again, very open in the book, that suicide takes courage. What made you feel that way?
Well, that's a hard one to talk about because, when you get so deep in a hole and you don't really feel you have the strength to dig out of that hole or get out of the hole. You asked me earlier about winning a first world championship, and Peggy Lee had a song, Is That All There Is? And that song really applied particularly because I told you I didn't really feel any elation until 3 days later, and I said, oh my gosh, we've accomplished something. And I wasn't around any of my teammates, but just in my private thoughts. And I felt there's been times in my life where I've been so low that, is it worth it to feel this bad all the time? But I've had some success in dealing with that.
How would you deal with it?
Well, I think that I read a lot, and I try to read a lot on people who've had extraordinary lives, been extraordinary leaders, and some of the battles they've gone through was the same thing. And what can go to them on more hard work, more competition, and also maybe trying to find a little silver lining in some of the things that you've done pretty well in your life. And again, I've never equated success A lot of people in our country, which I think is terrible, equate success with people who have enormous wealth. You know, I wasn't one of those players who, we didn't make very much money. I guess many ways, I think the best successes in terms of winning became as an executive. And also, I think that's when I really changed in terms of how I wanted to try to do things for younger people. I wanted to try to make a difference in people's lives. I wanted to do something to honor my brother. And I did a lot of those things, and I think that really helped relieve that horrible, horrible feeling that some people unfortunately act upon.
So you helped get yourself out of the funks, and I read it, there'd be like these 2-week stretches, just dark periods, but it was reading about, you know, books about other really successful people and pulling things that you identified with, and that
sure,
helped.
Sure. You know, our old political leaders fascinate me, okay? And I think sometimes we don't realize how many incredible leaders that have been presidents in this country. We don't realize how much people who have the ability to speak maybe leave a bigger mark in this world than any athletic accomplishment there is. I'm fascinated by people who can resonate and connect with all kinds of people. And I think probably one of the things I'm most proud of in my life is that, you know, I didn't go to school with anyone that was a minority, none. And when I came into the NBA, it was just starting to change from a lot of predominant white players to a number of black players. And I didn't go to school with anyone black until I was in college. And I will tell you, I got to, I guess in my life, to appreciate the plight that blacks have had in this country. And even today, you see more and more of it. And I think that the thing that I learned was that they were very similar to me because they grew up, many of them didn't have very much. And they succeeded because of their determination and the desire to show everyone that they could play the game at a high level. And my relationship with the black community in Los Angeles, I treasure. I really treasure. It's just something that I've connected with that community. I appreciate everything that they've ever said about me that's been positive.
In speaking to your son the other day, he said, you know, he knows how much you love him, but he can't remember the last time that you actually said those words, you know, I love you to him. And I know that's something, for whatever reason, that's difficult for you. And I wonder, how much do you think your father impacted you as a father?
Well, another very good question. I didn't like my father. I didn't respect my father. And I think these are the things that make it difficult for me to say I love you. You know, I hear people say, I love you for this, I love you for that, I love you, I love you, I love you. To me, it's a word that shouldn't be thrown around loosely. I think my family, my wife, my children know how much I care about them. They know. And I'm not a demonstrative person. I'm not.
When you were growing up, how afraid were you to go home?
I didn't go home till it was dark, unless it was raining.
Why not?
Well, it wasn't pleasant to be around my house. It wasn't pleasant at all. And I told you, I'm defiant. And sometimes when you're defiant, it irritates the wrong people. And obviously I irritated the wrong people sometimes.
That being your dad?
Yes, yes.
How physically abusive a household was it?
Well, you know, as I say, when you grow up in this, and my father certainly wouldn't be here to talk about it, okay, and it's probably not fair to him. But when you grow up, when you live paycheck to paycheck, he ended up working at the end of his working days. He ended up working for a coal mine, not as a coal miner. He worked for a coal mine, but he was an electrician. And it was a lot of stress to get up every morning at 4 o'clock and get home at 6 o'clock. To even meet any financial obligations you have. There wasn't really anything in our house. And yet, no one didn't go, didn't starve. But I think the things that, when you have an imagination and maybe when you dream things that you want to happen, never happen, it becomes difficult, it becomes very difficult. And I know that there were times I was probably didn't want to eat the same thing for 5 days, and I wouldn't do it. And that's when the Defiance came in. I'm not doing it. That's when the problem came. So it wasn't all him. It was me too. But I think my father didn't have a high school education. He didn't really have an education. My father was brilliant.
I believe you had 6 siblings, or one of.
Well, there were 3 boys and 3 girls.
And there were 23 years separating the oldest and youngest. You were the second youngest, and you, I think, really bared the brunt of the abuse. But how bad did it get at times?
Well, honestly, I really didn't want to come home most times. I didn't want to be there. And yet, I had, where did I have to go? I didn't have anywhere to go. So that's why I spent all my time in the outdoors and basketball. Particularly after my brother was killed in Korea, it became my greatest love in life. The
outdoors and the activity was kind of the escape?
It was an escape, and probably the worst times when when it was snowing back there and you really couldn't go out. It was like, almost felt trapped.
Your late brother, his passing, 21 years old, killed in action in the Korean War. What was it like for you going back to Korea to see where he fell, having that opportunity?
It's a very, very chilling feeling. And we went to the area where my brother was killed, and it was like one of the most chilling experiences I've ever had in my life. The memories, going back to when he said his last goodbye to us, to the return of his coffin with his body in it, the burial of him, all of those things came back in abundance. And I'll never forget when they brought his casket home to West Virginia. It was in our house. I'll never forget that day. I'll never forget that day. It was almost like a stroll down memory lane, and memory lane wasn't very pleasant.
For a while after his passing, you were still getting letters that he'd written your family, right?
Well, it was because, again, the mail from soldiers, and my mother would get these things, and obviously that was the apple of her eye, my brother David. I can see her getting those letters, and I can see her reading them, and I can recall tears running down her cheeks, and every once in a while she would show me one of them, and his encouragement to me to tell Jerry to keep working on his basketball. And I think probably maybe one of the biggest regrets I have in my life was him never having a chance to see me play, because I think he would have thought that my brother was pretty special.
Did those words in the letters that he wrote have a big impact on you?
Oh yes, they had an impact. And it always was about why him. But I'm sure every parent feels the same way that has lost someone in the war. Just a terrible, terrible thing for families to lose someone in the course of military action. And some of the wars that we have fought almost seem to defy reason why we've done it.
With just West Virginia in general, the area you've spoken before about how it's disappointing in a way that education is not the first priority there. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think it goes beyond that. It's not that education is not the first priority, but their education usually ends in a lot of areas in the 12th grade. That's a rudimentary education. And for people to be able to prosper today, they need a particular skill in certain areas as the world changes. And at one time, we were really a manufacturing country, and today we're not. We're more of a intellectual country, intellectual properties, enormous, wealth creating capabilities, banks, computer-related things. So you need a special education today to get involved in those fields. I think it seems like to me now everyone who graduates becomes a lawyer. So we have a lot of lawyers. Unfortunately, we have too many because people like to, I guess, protect themselves, and more importantly, you're always seeing these enormous lawsuits among companies that it makes no sense to me how this happens if you're doing business correctly. But this country is ever changing, and one of the things that people talk about here recently is the price of oil and how it affects the stock market. And I'm saying to myself, is the oil price going to go down more as we have more electric cars?
Yeah.
And most people say no. But one time we were so dependent on oil, and now if we want to be energy independent with all the new reserves they found in this country, we can do that.
Which is kind of funny right now. The price of oil is like $40 a barrel, and the stock market's as high as just about it's ever been. But what do you think? Growing up in the area you grew up, where diminished expectations, as you said, how did that motivate you?
Well, I think everyone faced the same challenge, but as I say, the thing that allowed me to do something, I had a skill, and it wasn't related to a mental skill, or it wasn't related to anything other than I had a skill to do something that people wanted me to go to school and get an education. And I wanted to play for my state university, but I could have played for almost anyone in the country. I even got, at that time, usually kids were recruited from the Mississippi River east, and now they're recruited all over the world. I mean, we have all kind of players playing in this country from other countries. And I remember getting a letter from UCLA, and I said, boy, that sounds kind of funny, that how would they, even know who I was? But had a lot of interesting offers, but I only wanted to play for West Virginia, my state university.
How did growing up poor teach you to take care of your family? Or what did growing up poor teach you about taking care of your family? Well,
there's, when say growing up poor, I probably grew up like a lot of kids, and they didn't have much anyway. But I think the one thing that really is interesting, when you get to a point in life when, I think when I was making $30,000 as an NBA player, oh my God, I thought I was the richest person in the world. And I think the last, if you belong in the NBA today, a couple more years, the average player's salary is going to be $8 million a year, and I was the second player taken. And I always thought that if I would have been born in a different era and maybe I had the same ability to play the game at a high level, all the things I would like to do for people, all the things I would like to do for the state, to have those kind of resources to be able to do it.
Why do you wish you would have run for governor of West Virginia?
I had a lot of people that wanted me to run for governor of West Virginia. And as I say, though, it would have been, I think, kind of interesting because people really liked me and cared about me in that state. They were very proud of what I meant to the state, and have always gone back to the state. I live there about 3 months in the summer now. And I think it would have been interesting because at that point in time, West Virginia had enormous mineral reserves. A lot of, if you wanted a job in West Virginia, you could get a diverse economy in terms of all these different countries, multinational countries, companies, by the way. And I had a different philosophy. Instead of leaving dollars there, why didn't they leave infrastructure? And I cared about the preservation of these little tiny communities that were predominantly dominated by the coal companies. They even had their own stores, okay? So they would pay the miners would get script to go shop in their stores. And I always thought, my goodness, this is not fair to the other people who are trying to run businesses, and particularly small businesses. The other thing I would have probably been remiss in is that there's no way in the world that a special interest group would have any chance to make a deal with me, none whatsoever. I don't believe in them. They're currying favors. You should do right. A politician should do what he's duly elected to do, serve and represent his people to the best of his ability. If I hadn't have been at a point in my life where I was doing something that I was loved, and that's being involved in basketball at a different time in my life, I think it might have been intriguing for me to do that, or make an attempt to do it, not knowing if I would get elected, but having all the people telling me that you'd be a shoo-in. I didn't believe that.
But you probably
I didn't believe it, and I wouldn't want to believe it, by the way.
Okay. Explain your connection to Charles Manson and your reaction to that book.
Oh my gosh. He's from West Virginia also. Mm-hmm. And I had a Ferrari, and again, I have no idea, but it mentioned in the book, Helter Skelter, how he followed this Ferrari on Sunset Boulevard. And this car was following me, okay? It was following, no question it's following me. But I had a lot of kids that would follow me home after a game. And so I thought it might, and this wasn't even a game night, okay? And it was the most weird feeling of all, because these other murders had occurred that he was part of. That I often wonder, because he said he was following this white Ferrari. And in the book.
You think it was you?
I don't know, but I know one thing, that he wasn't going to catch me in a Ferrari.
Life today, I understand there's a lot of golf, a decent amount of card playing. What's the routine like now?
Well, what I try to do, as I mentioned, I try to get up, and I think it's important when you're active and you have always been active in all your life, not to become sedate. I think once you become sedate, you're over, when you get older. But I like to get up and work out 3 or 4 days a week. I love to hit golf balls. I don't like to play.
Why not? You used to love to play.
Well, I used to love to play, but you have to play for a few dollars, okay? More than a few dollars. And but
what
anyway,
would the typical bet be?
Well, it was more than $1, let's put it that way. But what was fun about it, when I was a good player, I really knew where the ball was going.
And you say when you were a good player, your son says you're still like, what, a 3 or 4 handicap?
No,
or
I'm an 8 handicap.
Okay.
But
An 8 handicap.
last summer in West Virginia, I shot. I'm 76, and I shot par twice. So,
Okay.
But I practiced a lot. Now, I love to hit golf balls. It's kind of serenity for me, but the worst problem is that
you could have played professionally too
Oh,
if you
I
wanted.
don't
But you could have, right?
I don't-
And you
no,
just
no,
didn't
no.
know that you
Maybe
would
if I'd
win.
started maybe if I started when I was a kid. I didn't start till I was about 24. But I picked it up pretty fast, and I was always able to make putts. And, you know, we've got a great golfer here with the Warriors, Steph Curry. He's terrific. He really is good. And, you know, I think it was just something that I could immerse myself in, because when I played basketball myself when I was a kid, it was solitary. I'm a solitary person. And golfing is so solitary. I could go out and hit balls by the hours.
You were literally the NBA logo. How is that a source of pride for you?
Honestly, I don't even like to talk about it.
Why?
I think the NBA is in a very embarrassing position, and so I really don't like to get into that. You know, they don't. At one time, they don't want to even acknowledge it, but there was a huge story, and because there had been such controversy of who it might have been, and a huge controversy, and the guy who did it said it's me. But the way this came about, it wasn't because, you know, I think there was 4 players, and it was just a silhouette that he had gotten. There were 4 players, all of them prominent players, and they just thought this silhouette was the best silhouette. The only thing that I wish that would happen is that you get a royalty to it.
Right.
And really what I would do with it, I would take that royalty and I would try to do things in inner cities, make facilities that were safe for kids, provide them a place to go, and if they wanted to play basketball, there would be basketball facilities. But
do you think you should get a royalty?
Oh no, I wouldn't even dare go there. But
are you pleased with how it's been handled now?
I think it would be embarrassing.
Okay.
I think it would be embarrassing, and I don't like to do that. It's, again, if that's me, that's what I always say. If that's me, I'm really proud of it.
Are you pleased with how it's handled now, or do you think it's still handled in an embarrassing way?
I don't want to talk about it.
Really?
No.
What do you think of Steph Curry?
Really fun to watch. Great person. His family should be congratulating for someone who's so grounded. And you look at that little steaming little body. He plays the game with no force. LeBron James, James Harden, all of these guys play the game where they play with force. He doesn't. And he's still the best player on the team that has the best record in the league. He's clever. You know, he's not going to overpower you with strength. We have the most fun team in the league to watch, and he's a big part of that.
How does his talent and ability compare to some of the other greats that you've either played or worked with?
Well, you know, he's almost a different kind of player than you used to seeing. Honestly, he is. You know, he darts back and forth, and all of a sudden, bang, it's out of his hand. And he can have, you know, he can miss 5 shots in a row. And I've said this about this team because it seems like at home we get off to not great starts. We can be down now 9 points, and with Steph and Clay out there, the 4th time down the court, we might be ahead by 3 because of their incredible ability to make shots, and also because they draw so much attention that if some of our other players can make shots that they're capable of making, we will be a difficult out in the playoffs, a very difficult out.
The team's undisputably one of the best franchises in the league now. What was involved with getting it to that point?
Well, you know, I think everyone has a different idea how they should run something, okay? And we have an ownership group here that's fantastic. A lot of very wealthy people on board. But I think what they did, they went out and hired the right people to be involved here and be decision makers for them. And we have people of all ages. You know, I'm just another pair of educated eyes. You know, I'm here to encourage the younger people to not be afraid to make decisions. And I've always felt, and I talk about this a lot, people ask me, who does best in the NBA? I said, the best risk takers do. The best gamblers don't. They can seize on the moment. They can make deals that a lot of people don't understand, but assembling any kind of team is like a puzzle. And if you have a glaring piece of that puzzle missing, glaring, and it happens to be right in the center, you look at it and you say, oh my God, you're looking for that piece. Where is it? Where is it? If you're missing two pieces, it's not a complete puzzle. One piece is not a complete puzzle. So to build a team, you have to have the right elements of people playing for you at every position. You have to have people coming off the bench that can play very similar to starters, but different. And you have to have a coach that can put together the talent you have assembled and play the correct way for you to win.
You no longer have the final say, and I understand at times that's been difficult for you. How so?
Well, you know, it's kind of fun I have different opinions than other people. And I've been lucky enough to make some pretty good decisions. And at times I see things a little bit differently than anyone that I work with, even the two places I've been where we've had success. And I don't like to be in a position where I overrule someone. I don't like that at all. I think the thing that makes this franchise really special for me to be around everyone who's involved in decision making here, we have very open, free discussion. They're never contentious, never. And I think it's unbelievably healthy when you can do that. And I think that if you look at some of the things that have been done here and some of the things that haven't been done here, it's worked out great. I like my position here. At times I would probably like to make a different decision, but I defer.
How hard are those instances when somebody goes against your opinion?
No, they don't go against our opinion because somebody in the organization might feel the same. Mm-hmm. What's interesting about it is that, and I've told Joe and I've told Bob Myers, I said, look, I don't own this team. I'm not the executive running this team. This is my opinion and only my opinion. And it might be a strong opinion, by the way.
Final question for you. You know, obviously you've led such a rich life and, accomplished so much, whether it be as a player, coach, executive, done a lot for charity. You've been very open about personal struggles that you've had. You've spoken about how much you love teaching. How about the best lesson you've learned?
All of my best lessons have been learned through failure. Because I think when you go examine why you failed, and my definition of failure has to do with maybe not my individual failure, but a team-related failure. Where did we make our mistake? What do we need to get better? And if we couldn't make decisions or as a player or as an executive, particularly as an executive, I've learned more from the mistakes we made, never to replicate those again. I don't believe in any sport, and particularly when you're playing an 82-game schedule, maybe a 100-game schedule or more if you're in the playoff. You know, a lot of people believe in reclamation projects, okay? You see kids that are troubled kids, and they have wonderful talent, and maybe every once in a while you want to take a chance on those kids, but most of the time it breaks your heart because they have troubles they can't overcome. And those are the people that I really root for, the people who had some tough things in their lives, and particularly personal things that they can't seem to get ahead of themselves. They always revert back to the things that have deterred their careers, more importantly, deterred them as human beings. I just don't think it's wise to really try to do that in sports. I think it takes private counseling, I think it takes tremendous integrity on a person's part to do that. But if their talent, and particularly their wherewithal to say, I'm not going to do this again, I just think it's difficult to do that. And having said that, I've tried to do it twice in my life, where I really paid attention and tried to help them through some awkward time. And it hasn't worked out, and frankly, it's been maybe as painful for me as losing a player through retirement. It's been great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Great to meet with you.